Okay, first of all, my deep apologies from the audience. Out of no reason, my computer doesn't open my camera at the moment. I don't know why, but sorry for that. And great pleasure to be here and to launch with you. And special thanks, of course, to Mine Hocam for inviting us today. Let me first briefly mention what this research is about. The research and the findings that I will be sharing with you particularly seeks to unmask the Afghan migratory movement that is a long-standing precarity produced firstly in Afghanistan and speeded when they are on the move and clinched in Turkey, particularly in Istanbul. By linking the various forms of precarity of Afghan population is facing in Istanbul to the wider historical, social, economic, and political infrastructures of the region, we aimed to reach several objectives in this research. First of all, we believe that the current circumstances signal a much required attention to Afghan refugees, providing a grounded and also detailed analysis of the phenomena. But unfortunately, it was dramatically absent at the moment when we decided to do this research. Therefore, this research aims to fill this gap by seeking several objectives to accomplish. Firstly, we aim to analyze extremely precarious conditions of Afghans, the ways in which they are subjected to the policies of illegalization that constantly produce forms of exploitation in labor market, accommodation, medical care, as well as throughout their deadly journeys. And secondly, we examined international, legal, and institutional obstacles in the protection regime, which produces this illegalization that I just mentioned. And thirdly, since the beginning, one of the major aims of this research was to provide a nuanced analysis of Afghan community in Istanbul in terms of unpacking their socioeconomic, cultural, ethnic, or kinship-based differences among the community. And finally, we searched for their established networks, their solidarity and struggling strategies under the circumstances of this extreme exploitation. We strongly believe that the understanding of Afghan movement is impossible unless we look at the historical background and social composition of the country. The Afghan migratory movement represents one of the world's largest protracted refugee population, trying to escape from war, conflict, violence, suicide bombs, severe unemployment, dispossession, lack of basic services, as well as natural disasters that have been resulted in a country in its ashes for the last 4 decades. So the outcome is millions of people on the road trying to survive in many different countries, including Pakistan, Iran, Turkey, and also Europe, as you know. And so shaping and transforming such a wide regional terrain, Afghanistan seems to maintain, unfortunately, this unending violence in the country that has been ever increased since 2018 with the extended control of Taliban in the region. The social composition of Afghanistan is quite complex, where political, ethnic, religious, and kinship-based divisions between large and small groups are significant. The term that we use throughout the report, Kaum, refers to ethnic, religious, or kinship-based cleavages in the country. So in a nutshell, what we see out of this decades-long war and conflict is a kind of a social fabric in which Afghans experience the subjectivity of statelessness, lack of any institution or organizational infrastructure, lack of social cohesion, or any idea of peace, a peaceful life. Then the result is, as one of our informants nicely put, if you live in Afghanistan and if you want to be alive, you have to be on the move constantly. Considering the regional preconditions of Afghan movement, the research shines the spotlight on the city of Istanbul. Istanbul is selected as the main venue because of its unique composition, inhabiting the largest population of unregistered and undocumented Afghans working in the informal market. The city generally hosts 5 main categories that you see in the slide, including those who are undocumented without any passport, any identification, or with expired visas, those who have been registered in different satellite cities, but informally live in Istanbul. Thirdly, those who are in transit to reach Europe. So that's why they stay in Istanbul quite temporarily. And fourth, the old comers who have already resident permit or even citizenship. And finally, those who arrive through official visas for education or business purposes. In our research, we included all of these 5 categories. Among those, especially in the case of Istanbul, the phenomenon of single, young, undocumented Afghan men is the most significant social group, constituting the majority who have been totally abandoned by the international protection. The research is based on 50 semi-structures and in-depth interviews conducted with Afghans in various districts, Zeytinburnu, Esenyurt, Tuzla, and Beykoz. The field research was conducted in the period of July and October 2020. Out of 50 interviews, 12, as you see, 12 of them were done online, while 38 of them were face-to-face interviews, in which we benefited from relatively smooth period of summer. During our field research, the undocumented and unregistered Afghans were the hardest ones to reach, as you can imagine, since they are considerably invisible, isolated, and distrustful to outsiders. We tried to come up with alternative ways. We worked together with 3 Afghan assistants in the field who pursue their education in Istanbul, and plus our friend Gani, who managed to reach Uzbeks and Turkmens who can speak Turkish. Their involvement in the field notably shaped and strengthened our capacity to reach our respondents and to build relations of trust. Among 5 categories constituting the demography of Istanbul that I just mentioned, the majority of Afghans composed of young, undocumented, single Afghan men, denoting the predominant composition of Afghan presence in Istanbul. While our sample captures the differences in the community, it simultaneously reflects the macro level distribution with 42 persons who fall into the first 3 categories. On the charts, on the slide, you see the distribution of our sample in terms of their date of arrival to Turkey, their legal status, age, kaum-based cleavages, and their marital status. We aimed to grasp ethnic and kinship-based cleavages within the Afghan community, which is quite rare in the literature, in order to observe their potential hierarchies within their networks. So the report firstly shed light on 2 main routes in reaching Turkey. The first one starts from Afghanistan to Pakistan and then Iran. And the second one begins directly from Afghanistan to Iran via obtained visa, official visa. The testimonies of our respondents draw out the very precarious journey of Afghans from Afghanistan through Pakistan and Iran, ultimately to Turkey, which contains infinite numbers of perils lurking in the relentless geographical conditions of mortal mountains and vast deserts. In the report, we reanimate all the steps of these journeys by portraying and visualizing the dangerous routes, the vehicles they use, as you now see on the map, the smugglers, the bandits, and border forces they have to deal with during the journey. In addition to the unending, as you can imagine, negotiations, struggles, and even clashes among Afghans. Overall, the report tracks Afghans' journey, which stretches over large territories into weeks and months under these treacherous circumstances in order to critically depict their extremely precarious living conditions on the way to Turkey. And particularly to the city of Istanbul. When you check the report, you will see the maps we created, which illustrate the journeys of Afghans since Afghanistan till Istanbul with quite interesting details, actually. Now, the report, secondly, examines the production and reproduction of various forms and levels of precarity that continues in Istanbul after their deadly journeys. In this regard, the potential hierarchies within Afghan community are mainly between oldcomers and newcomers. The oldcomers, who now hold mostly resident permits or even citizenship, as well as those who came through official procedures, represent the most privileged group that lays the foundation of the chain of networks. And Uzbeks and Turkmens mainly constitute this category. In addition to their privileged legal status, the duration of stay in Istanbul and Turkish language, of course, are highly influential. The oldcomers basically built the network infrastructure, I would say, in terms of renting houses and also finding a job for others. They usually work in small businesses, restaurants, and shops, and relatively early comers who are usually who are referred mostly as muhaberat, as we learned from our respondents. They call them as muhaberat. They symbolize the hubs within the network that accommodates the newcomers. So those who do not have a relative or have lost his or her network usually stay for a couple of days in parks, mosque courtyards, or in seaside in the districts of Istanbul. And muhaberats in these certain locations are waiting for them to provide a contact for any available house. The study indicates that apart from the oldcomers who have social and economic capital due to their legal status, there is a well-connected, highly closed and introvert network among undocumented Afghans, in which they usually seek to solve their problems by themselves rather than asking any help from outsiders. Second, the second main observation in our research is that the undocumented and unregistered Afghans, which constitute the majority, represent the largest precarious labor force as they are subjected to the hardest working conditions in Istanbul. They carry out a wide spectrum of bodily labor in sectors such as construction, repair shop, manufacturing, transportation, car mechanic, and garbage paper collection, etc. They paid incredibly low daily prices and exposed to countless exploitative treatments by their employers. We can discuss more about that in the Q&A session. The accounts of our interviewees point out that Afghans constantly, which was quite interesting actually, constantly shift from one job to another and in parallel from one place to another, wherever jobs are available. So without having any social life, any kind of social life, they are compelled to work without any rest in order to send remit back to their families in Afghanistan. So our research underlines that the Afghan population in Istanbul constitutes a considerable manual labor force in which their bodily and ascetic labor symbolizes their one and only capital. They work nearly for 14 hours in a day by being paid with a 100 to 150 Turkish lira per day. As one of our informants, who is quite active in grassroots initiative, noted that Afghans have something special that makes them different compared to other migrant communities. Something, he says, something keeps them up despite all of these severe circumstances, and they never complain about it. Here you see several anecdotes from our Afghan respondents clearly indicating the extent of which their existence is based on their manual labor. As you can see, one of our respondents says where the work is, and Afghan is there. It was, the phrase was frequently mentioned throughout our fieldwork. And another one says, I do not attend any meetings or gatherings. We do not have anything to do with these activities. We work. And another one, I would work until I get deported. We didn't receive any aid. We do not go anywhere for aid, we work. And sometimes they mention that once in a month or twice in a month, they go to seaside and play cricket. And which is illustrated by the photo, as you can see. And I would like to send my thanks to Emir Khan for sharing this photo with us. Among this high magnitude of this labor force, we observed hierarchies within the labor sector, mainly based on the length of stay in Turkey. Secondly, kaum-based cleavages, in which I would say Uzbeks and Turkmens, as you can imagine, have the privilege. And accordingly with the capacity of their Turkish language. While Uzbeks and Turkmens usually get employed in the shops and restaurants that I have mentioned, they do so with the capital of their Turkish language, basically. It seems that also the job of garbage collection, paper or garbage collection, stands at the bottom of this stratum. Overall, the research mainly argued that the Afghan community has very exceptional character among other migrant communities who usually do not have a mentality of business or entrepreneurship, but just their bodily labor in order to survive and in order to remit back. Despite the devastating working conditions, they portray exceptionally resilient and tolerant attitude. As one of them said, work is not so hard. You should have seen what kinds of work we have done before. And he was just 19 years old. The report thirdly analyzes the relationship between invisibility and mobility of Afghans in Istanbul. While undocumented and unregistered respondents describe how they minimize contact in their daily life due to their fear of deportation, every moment that they feel, they simultaneously demonstrate high levels of mobility in the labor market. So this designates a tension between politics of condemnation on the one hand and securitization on the other. It is suggested in the report that the modus operandi behind the governance of deportation is based on a balance between these two politics, condemnation and securitization, what we call as mobility security nexus, in which highly mobile labor force of Afghans is somehow tolerated by the state authorities unless a security concern or highly macro level political issues appear on the table. The institutional and bureaucratic barriers in legal protection, such as I mentioned in the slide, rejected applications, indeterminate circulation for legal access from one city to another, closed registration in Istanbul, etc., prepare the grounds for this modus operandi that produces systematic illegalization of Afghans in Istanbul. As a result, Afghans informally moved to Istanbul to find a job where they have to live totally invisible lives out of the fear of deportation. So the results show that the police checkpoints and apprehensions have increased, especially after July 2019, when, as we all remember, when the governor of Istanbul announced a statement declaring that unregistered persons will be sent back from Istanbul either to their countries of origin or their designated satellite cities, especially in the case of Syrians. Our informants frequently mentioned that the checkpoints dramatically proliferated right after the announcement. But interestingly, like kind of a couple of months after the announcement, things have become much stabilized in Istanbul. Shortly, we argue that such institutional infrastructure, both in Istanbul and in satellite cities, lead to Afghans to stay undocumented since they believe that registration is nothing in practice. They just give a blank paper with your name on it, and 6 months later, they just renew that paper, they say. when means of international protection for non-Syrians in general in Turkey in practice is indeterminate times of revision of those blank papers, but nothing more, that which has been frequently mentioned by our respondents. To conclude, of course, we have lots of details and quite interesting notes in the report, but due to the limit of presentation here, I just mentioned some of them and the overall summary of our report. But if I should conclude, I would like to say that based on the already mentioned institutional and bureaucratic obstacles, working as a deterrence in front of the legalization, and also wider international protection in its particular constructed categories, such as political asylum versus economic migrant. Because all of these infrastructure, national and international infrastructure, their precarity, Afghans' precarity, starts in their home country and moves with their bodies, actually, across countries and regions. The ones who survive from this deadly journey and who manage to reach to Turkey and Istanbul, after which their predicament ensues in the hands of cruel market conditions, they work under extremely cruel conditions, and they live a totally isolated and invisible life in Istanbul with lack of any access to public services or even to public life in general. And they try to earn money to remit back home to support their families as their resilient body allows them. And they are completely abandoned by the international community as well as civil society, both in Istanbul and across Turkey. Then the Afghan population, as we mentioned in our title of the report as well, stands at the margins of precarity. Their bodily labor becomes the one and only capital they have, while the heaviest working conditions turn them into docile bodies. The legal precarity intimidates them with all pervasive fear of deportation that they feel every moment of the day. Accordingly, they become subjected to extremely self-enclosed and invisible life within the hidden corners of Istanbul, I would say, despite the fact that they construct all the infrastructure of this city with their manual labor. Thank you so much for listening.